Hello Team SNG test hands video. Today we're going to be doing the test hands for our Phantasm Spiral deck profile, which was featured on the channel earlier this week. You can find the link for it down in the description below. While you're attention, I'd like to ask you guys, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and leave us a subscribe. Now, the way we're going to do this is because this is a going first deck, and it is completely control orientated, what we're going to actually do is we're going to do 5 going first test hands, because the test hands are going to be quite short. And I'm basically going to draw 5 cards and tell you what we can establish and what our opponent is likely going to have to play through to get through our board that we can put up. That being said, let's get into it. Alright, so, first test hand. Pot of Desire is always nice, consider something else. We have a monster we can normal summon, which is nice to have. Summon Limit, a nice little floodgate that the deck has access to. And we have our Field Spell, the most important card the deck has. And we have Phantasm Spiral Battle, meaning that we're going to be able to limit what our opponent can do by popping things off of their field. So first things first, we're going to hit that Desires because we obviously want to be able to draw lots of cards and hopefully see something else just to give us that extra power. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. What have we banished off? That's unfortunate. We banished off both of our other copies just because it does mean we could be in trouble if our opponent does manage to get rid of our field spell. However, we have seen Sea Stealth attack, so we could always activate it from the grave as later on if we needed to. Unfortunate, again, we've seen Heat Wave, but Heat Wave is one of those cards where it's really useful to have in your first hand, but beyond that, it can be kind of difficult to use, just because you need it right at the start of the main phase. At this point, we're going to activate our field spell. Normal summon our Black Sea Squatter, triggering our field spell to let us search. We're going to search out any of our Phantasm Spiral spell traps. Seeing as Phantasm Spiral Dragon is still in the deck, I'm going to go with Phantasm Spiral Wave, actually, because we do have our battle already in hand. I'm going to equip Wave to my Black Sea Squatter. So now, if my opponent destroys Black Sea Squatter by battle, he won't actually be destroyed the first time he's in battle. Next, I'm going to set Summon Limit, and I'm going to set my Sea Stealth attack. I don't need to set Phantasm Spiral Battle because I can activate it from hand because I have Yumi on field. And once my opponent activates an effect, we're going to produce a token, and then we're going to activate Summon Limit so that our opponent can only have one more summon that turn. And now our opponent's in a situation where they're kind of in a lot of trouble because they're not going to be able to do a whole lot about getting rid of our Black Sea Squatter with only 2 summons and a token with 2,000 attack. On top of that, if they do attack into our Black Sea Squatter and he survives, well, then our Phantasm Spiral Wave is going to summon straight out of our deck big beefy boss monster in our Phantasm Spiral Dragon. So this was a really nice opening because we did see a monster and our field spell, and we did have a floodgate. We also had our Phantasm Spiral Battle, so if our opponent puts anything on the board, we can activate this from hand, pop their card. So that's all really nice. That was a really nice opening for this deck. I think a lot of decks these days would have quite a hard time breaking through that. The only way that most decks can play through this, honestly, is to just have things like Twin Twisters and start popping stuff off. So our going second test hand, second test stand. Phantasm Spiral Wave. It's my favorite of the Phantasm Spiral equips. Heat Wave, really nice to see. Sea Stealth Attack. Another Spiral Wave. Okay, you don't want to see that. But we do see our field spell, so that's not so bad because we do actually have plays we can make here. So, first things first, because Heat Wave has to be activated at the start of main phase 1, activate Heat Wave. What that's going to do is it's going to make it so your opponent cannot special summon effect monsters or normal summon effect monsters until my next draw phase, meaning that I'm going to basically have a turn of pure setup. I can then activate my Phantasm City, and I can set my Sea Stealth Attack. Now, on my opponent's turn, when they activate any effect, we're going to be able to summon a token using our Phantasm City. That will then trigger Phantasm City to let us search. We're going to likely be searching our Phantasm Spiral Battle because we already have the equips in hand to get our Phantasm Spiral Dragon out. And then if our opponent activates anything that would pop our Phantasm City, we can activate Sea Stealth Attack, tribute off our token, and that will then let us you banish off a water monster, and it will protect your other spell traps on the field from destruction. So you get rid of the token, you protect your Phantasm City, and then if your opponent activates another effect, your Phantasm City will produce another token, which will then make your Phantasm Battle live, which you can use to pop something. And then on your next turn, you activate your Phantasm Spiral Wave, attack at the end of the battle phase. You will then summon out your Phantasm Spiral Dragon from the deck, and so you'll have another big beater on the field. And the Phantasm Spiral Dragon being summoned out will then also trigger your Phantasm City to let you search another Phantasm Spiral Battle, and it all just spirals off really, really well then. Okay. Battle, Crash, Fists of the Unraveled Tenyi, Power, Solemn Strike. So this is what you are likely to see with a deck that is so heavily reliant on seeing its field spell. Because we run so few monsters, it is potential that we don't see a monster and we don't see our field spell. And if we don't see our field spell, we can't produce a token. If we can't produce a token, 3 of these 5 cards are not live because you need a monster on the field for any of those 3 to be active. You do have a Solemn Strike, but that is about it. So you'd basically be setting all 3 and hoping to survive a turn. Now, you can set your Unrivaled Tenyi, and if your opponent does pop it, it will float into your Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which is nice, but that doesn't make these live as he's considered a fusion, and these are only live if there's a normal monster on the field. So you could potentially be in trouble, but if your opponent does pop your Unraveled Tenyi, you could get lucky. You do have Spiral Crash for the next turn. Hopefully you find a way to get to a monster. That's not going to help you right away because, again, you'd need a Worm monster on the field. So this is one of the risks this deck does have, is you can open a hand that will not see you into any of your monsters for several turns, and that can really give you a hard time if you can't necessarily draw the negates or the floodgates to at least slow your opponent down. This is definitely one of those decks that's got a high risk, high reward type of playstyle. If you see your Phantasm Spiral City, you're probably going to win. If you don't, you're probably not going to win. Now, obviously, there are ways to play around it, and every deck has a bad matchup, but spell trap removal can definitely hurt this deck. However, there are ways of playing around that, as your Phantasm Spiral City is going to likely produce a token before your opponent can remove it, so you at least will have a body. Sea Stealth Attack, Dragon, Pot of Desires, Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. So this isn't great. Again, we've got 2 Pots of Desires. We're kind of wholly reliant on them because our Phantasm Spiral Dragon's a dead card in our opening hand. So let's see what we banish off. Alright, so That's not great, but that's not so bad. We're banishing off 2 monsters we could normal summon. We're also banishing off 2 there can only be 1s, meaning there's only 1 left in the deck. And we're banishing off some of our equips that could help us get the Phantasm Spiral Dragon out of our hand. The only way to really redeem this would be if one of these 2 cards here that we've just drawn is our Phantasm Spiral City. Well, there's our 3rd there can only be 1, so at least we do have a Floodgate. And we have Terraforming, so we can activate our Terraforming to search out our Phantasm Spiral City. And now we're actually in business. So, just goes to show you, a Pot of Desires really can turn a game around. You activate your Phantasm Spiral City, you set there can only be 1, you set Sea Stealth Attack, and you set your Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. Now, if at any point your opponent activates anything, your Phantasm Spiral City will produce yourself a token. You can shotgun your There Can Only Be 1 and your Sea Stealth Attack. Now, if your opponent activates anything else, you banish off your token with your Sea Stealth Attack to protect all 3 of these cards. And then if your opponent goes to activate anything else, your the Phantasm City will produce another token, and that token will make your Unrivaled Fists of the Tenyi live. So, at the end of the day, this wasn't too bad because we were able to see our field spell. But if we don't see our field spell, the deck can really sort of peter out, as seen in the last test hand. Summon Limit, nice little Floodgate. Heatwave, better Floodgate. Phantasm Spiral Battle, Solemn Strike, and Heavenly Dragon Circle. Okay, so again, we haven't seen our field spell in our opening hand, but we've likely stalled for at least a turn, and we've also got a card that can potentially help us continue to stall beyond that. So first things first, we'll activate Heatwave. We'll set Summon Limit and Solemn Strike. On our next turn, it kind of comes down to what we draw into. Hey, check that out. Mekk-Knight Avram. So we can then normal summon him. That'll make this Phantasm Spiral Battle live, meaning that we can then pop stuff off of our opponent's field. So we'll set our Phantasm Spiral Battle and hopefully attack over something, seeing as we have limited what our opponent can do. If our opponent hasn't managed to summon a monster because of Heatwave, then we've probably still got our summon limit set face down. The following turn after that, we draw into Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. So yet again, we're in a good situation because we can set that and continue comboing off that way. So we're basically going to sit behind a 2000 beater and just hopefully run over our opponent as the game goes on. Definitely, this deck has the ability to play in the grind just because of the ability to protect the single monster that it can put out. Well, that's always a good sign. Seeing our field spell early is the best. Seeing that is even better because that protects our field spell. There can only be 1. Nice little Floodgate, Summon Limit. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's all coming up Phantasm Spiral here. So this is a really, really nice opening. So first things first, we activate our Pacifism, the Phantasm Spiral, the Phantasm City, and we set our Sea Stealth Attack, our There Can Only Be 1, and our Summon Limit. On our opponent's turn during the standby phase, we're going to want to activate our Sea Stealth Attack, our There Can Only Be 1, and our Summon Limit. The minute our opponent activates an effect, that will trigger our field spell to produce a token and search us out one of our Phantasm Spiral spell traps. So we're likely going to search out Battle, seeing as we do have a field spell which we can use to get our Phantasm Spiral Dragon out. Only likely going to use our Sea Stealth Attack to protect our field if our opponent has Spell Trap Destruction. If they don't, then we're likely going to try and sit on that token and pop off something from our opponent's field later in the turn. But the goal for us will definitely be to sit on this token until our turn, when we can activate Phantasm Spiral Crash, and then have the token deal some battle damage and special summon out the big true boss monster of the deck. Also, the special summon of Phantasm Spiral Dragon on our following turn will let us search using Phantasm Spiral City another Phantasm Spell Trap. So I would typically likely go for our Spiral Wave, making it even more difficult for our opponent to get rid of our Phantasm Spiral Dragon, as he'll now have piercing damage, and he'll be undestructible once per turn by battle. On top of summon limit, there can only be one. There's not a whole lot your opponent's going to be able to do. This was absolutely opening bee's knees with this deck, and that is what I like to show you. That all being said, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Make sure you leave us a like, leave us a comment, and leave us a subscribe. And I will see you guys at the next video.